going.
So welcome to the show, Vince. We appreciate you being here.
Hey, thanks for having me, Sean.
So a couple of questions sort of right off the bat. I wanted to talk to you about your personal financial journey. I mean, this is the Crushing Debt podcast. So we'd like to know a little bit about what some of our guests had to go through in their financial journeys.
Yeah, and crushing debt was definitely a part of my personal financial journey too. It didn't start that way. When I was younger, I always had an interest in businesses and saving money, very frugal. First businesses, so selling lizards, frogs, and collecting cans, right? That eventually graduated into more sustainable businesses. And, as I was going into high school and in early college, I bought my first piece of real estate. So I was investing in real estate early, had some side businesses, had a job. Things were going well. I wasn't financially well off, but I felt secure. I knew my bills were being paid. And then, like many college students do, I got in some debt. I made some dumb decisions, like investing using a credit card, and ended up going through 3-4 years of real financial strain and trouble and worry. So I did have that experience. I did live that experience. And that really brought me to a point where I'm like, hey, I want to help people avoid this, right? It was avoidable. I knew reflecting, I made mistakes. And so I entered into financial services, right? And I found in those years, oftentimes my last few years were in mortgage industry. And I felt like I was putting Band-Aids on people. I'd pay off their debt. I would lower their rate. They'd be in good situation. I'd work out a budget for them. And then 3, 4, 5 months later, a year later, they'd say, I need another 50 grand. I need another 100 grand, right? So this was a cycle I saw. Then I went up to my parents when I was really about ready to leave the industry. And my mom said, hey, you always talked about why financial literacy isn't taught in schools. That always bugged you. And so from that point on, when I came back, I dropped what I was doing in the financial services and followed through with financial education. And we started the National Financial Educators Council in 2006.
Nice. And so I want to talk to you about what financial literacy means. But before we get there, something you said before. So you were investing in real estate in college.
Yeah, even before that. So when I was 19, I believe that was my first purchase, and bought another piece of real estate that I lived in for many years up until a few years ago. When I was in my early 20s, I was actually a busboy at a restaurant during that time, and one of the guys was a realtor. I was brainstorming with them, and he said, "Hey, we got this opportunity, real low price condos coming on the market, apartment conversions," and one thing led to the other. So it was, it started early. And, I was always reading and learning about the exciting things, the investing, the businesses. But where I failed was the basics, credit, the budget, the stuff that isn't so sexy, but is critically important when you're working toward making investments.
Yeah, that's the one thing that most people don't appreciate. It's the budget is so important, but it's so boring. Oh my goodness, why need a budget? Why it's like, why tell your money where it goes? But that's, I think those are the things. It's not sexy, and that you investing and going straight to making the money itself is what people gravitate to itself. But without that foundation, that's what hurts a lot of folks. Especially now, I've seen some of your videos itself, that recession, that big word we've been talking about itself. Yeah. And if you don't have that foundation itself, most people, this is the time when people start to see the cracks in their plan. And that's where, this kind of knowledge is important for them. So totally see that. Let me ask you one thing though. Again, your mission statement, again, financialeducatorscouncil.org. Empowering financial wellness and champions. You've got the education piece. Again, me as a financial coach, I've actually come across your website, so I do appreciate the literature and the information you put out there. What is it that what do you mean by empowering financial wellness champions? Because obviously you have the education, you have the coaching, but what does that mean in regards to what you're trying to do out there?
Yeah, so our mission changed since we founded. At first, we were boots on the ground, delivering financial education, financial coaching in our community and surrounding. Eventually that grew. We started to do these higher profile events with celebrities, sports stars, and then people started to ask us to utilize our materials and our resources. And what we found, there was a huge need. A lot of people were having to reinvent the wheel. A nonprofit would get a $50,000 grant 45,000 would go toward creating the material. So we really switched gears and pivoted about a decade ago, 12 years ago, to helping people that are passionate about this, like yourselves in these communities. And we call them financial wellness champions. So whether they're financial educators or whether teaching groups or financial coaches that work one-on-one with people, our mission is really providing them training, resources, and support to help them grow and scale a program. And how we measure our impact is not only by that revenue, but also our social impact. We became a certified B corporation here last year, which holds us to a high standard of social, environmental, and governance impact. So really help propel our mission forward and codify what we're trying to do. And I definitely appreciate you and Sean. You guys are educators and coaches, bringing this to the masses. So I appreciate your efforts.
So getting back to my earlier question, based on that, what do you mean by financial literacy?
Yeah, literacy, the official term is really focused on content knowledge. I think the industry really looks at it as, hey, you need to have some content knowledge. So knowledge of personal finance topics, credit, budgeting, etc. But we also have to address behaviors, their sentiment, meaning overall confidence, relationship with money. We need to address the systems they have established and in place, and also those team members that can help them. So although that term literacy is really just, we're expanding that term to really incorporate how do we help people work toward greater financial strength, right? That's what it means to us. So it's a little different than the literal definition, but that's really what the industry means by that term.
So when we talk about, if you had to pick maybe the most important thing that if someone's saying, well, where do I start financial literacy? What's the number one thing that someone should know or recognize about financial literacy if they want to start on that path? What's the best tip or the number one piece of knowledge?
Yeah, the first piece of knowledge might sound like I'm scapegoating that question, but I'll circle back to it. The first thing you should know is everybody's different. Your situation is completely different than everybody else's, and your goals and what you need to do to get there is completely different. To simplify, financial literacy and just overall financial health, I think really taking a look at a few key aspects of what you're doing really boils down to what is your ability to save on a regular basis. So that requires the ability to look at your income and your expenses. Are you able to save regularly? I think that's the foundation piece that can lead to greater financial security, your ability to invest, your ability to make other decisions. And so that's really what we try to, if I had to simplify it to that one thing, what is your savings rate ratio? How much are you able to save a month? Are you able to do that consistently? Do you have that backup plan in place? And that takes a real focus on income and expenses.
So when we're talking about financial literacy, we're talking about learning all of this stuff that really should start as soon as possible, right? At as early an age as possible, right?
I agree. There's studies out of Cambridge University that points to financial habits forming by age 7. Brown University points to a study of that work ethic habits formed by age 9. And once these habits form, they're hard to change. So I think it's critical we're addressing at a very young age and helping them build these habits. One thing we suggest parents do is to bring financial literacy into homes. And one of the simplest ways is interactive. You don't have to sit down at the table and teach them, hey, here's what ROI is, right? It doesn't matter to them at that age, but we want to get them at habits, chores where they can earn money.
Yep.
And then they can pay, we have them pay part of the household expenses. So, a 5-year-old, the parent can sit down, hey, you're going to be paying part of the house bill, part of the car. As they get into high school, it can get more complex. And then also obviously saving for the short and long term. So I think parents play a vital role in that. I would also love, and we promote this being adopted into schools because it's a subject that benefits 100% of students. I don't think there's you have your base subjects and, you need to know how to talk and write, but, in later grades, that's a subject that benefits everybody. So I think it's critical we adopt that in schools, starting in elementary school and continuing through their higher education.
I think that's awesome. My youngest is now 8. So both of my boys are over 7. I can't wait to tell them, I'm going to give you a salary. I'm going to give you an allowance of like, I don't know, $10 a week, but you're responsible to make the $2,000 mortgage payment. Go for it.
Rent's due, buddy.
Put them to
Come
work
on.
there, Sean. Put them to work. They're paying a small portion, so at least the goal is to have that conversation with them. So they might be paying 100, 1/10 of it, right? But you're
Right.
paying them extra in allowance because
Yeah.
you're getting that back. So don't strap them with the entire payment. Sean.
Sean's tough.
He's,
I hear you,
he's,
man.
he's I'm done working. Put the kids to work.
I'll file the eviction. I'll throw them out.
You know how to do that. That's too funny. Let me ask though, like, I think the most parents struggle. We know that we should be having this conversation with kids and giving them these, but when we have parents that are struggling with these behaviors and these situations themselves, I get those, those situations where it's like, yeah, we know we need to teach the kids, but what if the kid comes back and says, hey, mom, how we doing with our emergency fund or our savings itself? And we, as parents, it's a shame, like sometimes we have those emotional kind of like, oh man, that's like, well, if I don't bring it up with the kids, they won't know really how bad or how, our situation itself. What's our advice to parents to kind of like, hey, look, no matter what the situation is, it's still important to provide this information, this knowledge, this skill to our kids at a young age?
Yeah, that is a great point. I know a lot of parents feel uncomfortable even having that conversation
Right.
with money with their kids. I think if they can start early, make it into more of a game where it doesn't like they're not really down at the table. Additionally, I think parents can really use teachable moments in a very positive way. So if the kid sees them, looking at one can of soup versus the other, why are they picking this? Are they price comparison shopping? What is helping them make that decision? If they decide not to buy something, we can use that as an opportunity to teach them about opportunity costs. But I think too, parents really need to, try to not deepen negative habits. So for instance, kids are inundated with advertisers from a very young age. It's all telling them, hey, you're going to be cool, buy this, you'll be popular. And then we have influencers and these even mid-level influencers that, one of the biggest videos on YouTube is kid unboxing videos.
Yeah.
So there's a ton of influence on these kids. So they're bred to be consumers from the outside. And what happens, parents will solidify this by, if a kid sees this, and I saw this a few years ago, but a woman at the store, kid in the cart, a little girl down 4 or 5 years old, just throwing a fit over this Disney candy cane thing, throwing an absolute fit. And the mom was like, no, we can't do it. We're not, it's bad for you, blah, blah, blah. After a few minutes, she gave up. I can't blame her, right? She had her hands full. But now this child now will associate with throwing a fit with getting what they want.
Right.
Fast forward 20, 30 years later, what's going to happen, right? So those are just some basic things. So they don't have to really, sit down, give them that formal education because there are other people out there that can help. But if they're helping them establish habits and not reinforcing the bad habits, that's a great foundation.
So I remember very early in my life, my dad is a CPA. We were not by no means rich, but we had a good living growing up. My dad made some good money with us growing up, but I'll never forget my grandmother passed away. My mother's mother passed away when I was really young. And so my grandfather married his next wife when my grandmother passed, and never really got along with grandma after that. And I'll never forget my dad saying one day, don't tell anybody how much you make, because he had made the mistake of telling my grandfather, and then who I knew as grandma somehow figured out what his salary was. And from that point on, it was, well, you can afford that, you make X, or you can afford that, you make X. I don't know that that's necessarily what you're talking about, but should you be having, should I be telling my kids? I mean, I remember coming home and saying, we had a great June. The law firm had a great June. We can afford to do a little bit more this month because we got a little bit of extra money because we did so well. Should we be telling our kids, this is what I make, this is what I spend? Do we get into that much detail with them?
Yeah, great question. I think each parent is unique, right? Some people are going to feel comfortable with that, some people aren't. I think if you don't, there's other ways we can address that. I do like, and your example is perfectly related to what I said, so that's understand. But I do encourage parents, when possible, to bring kids in to meet their financial professional. So if they're meeting a lawyer, they go in, bring the kid in for a few minutes. They can sit out in the hall, but at least that few minute interaction time, so they know what it's like to shake a hand, to look somebody in the eye, to talk to a professional. So I don't think they need to, have them in there or sit them down to share their budget. But I do think it's important that they're starting to meet professionals at a young age. I remember the first time I got a mortgage, I was young, went in, guy was in a suit. I was super intimidated. I had no idea I was throwing these numbers around. And maybe I took out a bad loan. I don't know at the time. But the point is, hey, if I would have had more experience and comfort, I think I would have handled that situation a little better, at least more confidently.
So what should we be teaching our kids? Not as parents, but what should our school systems be teaching our kids?
Yeah, elementary school really starting to help them build habits and gain the foundation knowledge, right? And that habit forming is critical, the behaviors and all that's very critical. I think the chores in elementary school, the parents, bringing that side in, because if it's just taught in school and they go home and see something different, it doesn't work well, right? But it's important that schools would include the parents in this education, provide resources for the parents to continue that. So there's that flow between, hey, this is what I learned in school about a budget. Now you're implementing it with your parents, right? Things change when we get to high school. I think high school should really focus on life stages. So some of the early life stages that get people in trouble, buying their first car. I see a lot of very nice cars in colleges around here. It's like, I drove a beat up green truck with a dent in the side. I was worried about getting to school. I don't know how they get this money. A lot of nice cars. They move out on their own, make mistakes. The biggest one I see debt wise is the college decision, right? They're not choosing a college based on ROI. It's because their student counselor said, hey, go find, go to 3 colleges, find the coolest one and go there. And then lastly, they get into credit card debt, right? Because nobody explained. Now you got all these offers. I got these offers. I got free T-shirts. I got free pizza. I loved it, right? I ate good. I dressed on that. Maybe I didn't dress so good, but I ate good. So it gets people behind the 8 ball early on, and then they're struggling with this debt. Once you start behind the 8 ball, it's a lot harder to overcome. In addition, those are key savings years that now they're behind, right? So I think that switch to life stage in high school is critical, so they're prepared to make confident, qualified financial decisions on near-term things. If we have time, we get to investing in those other areas that are important. But initially, hey, what's going to impact them right now and what's most important in their lives in the near term?
Yeah, and I think that's where I know Florida's, they're starting a law that they're teaching that financial, literacy course itself. Some of the things that I've read though does focus more on the credit score, the checkbook, the tools that we need as part of having good financial independence and having that going into the future. The big thing that I love how you're emphasizing, it's the behaviors, man. That's the stuff that gets us into trouble when it comes to, we have this instant gratification, delayed gratification, and we're in that society today where it's like, give me now, I want to feel it now. Amazon, I can click something and there's a drone flying some kind of box and put it in on my porch and stuff like that. We're in that society. So I mean that's the thing that we're up against, and I imagine you're seeing it too. Is it kind of like, hey guys, we're playing the long game here. We're doing the marathon itself, and trying to get that message across. So I truly believe what you're saying and what we're doing, but I think the hard part is how do we get some of this stuff across to our kids, but as well as the parents who are kind of struggling with some of this stuff as well.
Yeah. And you did mention the Florida Financial Literacy Bill. I did an hour-long show on this about a month ago. And, I think it's great that it's in the news, right? That people see the need, and we do surveys, always over 80% of people say, hey, I wish I was taught about money in school, right? So there's a need, but with all these, the majority, I think Utah's a little different, with the majority of states out there, I see major gaps. One, there's no overarching goal. It's a pieces. Hey, what's a credit score? Florida even has what to do with inheritance money, right? How does that apply to everybody? What's the overarching goal, right? Second, it's not enough time. 10 hours, I think, is their bill. Others are, 15. There's no testing standard. So, I mean, try speaking a foreign language. I took 2 years of Spanish and no hablo español bien, right? So it's 2
It's a
years, right?
biblioteca, I bet. That's all you need to know.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. They don't have trained teachers, right? They're bringing the gym coach or somebody that went to advanced training on math or economics. That's not personal finance. There's behaviors, there's emotions, there's things. So I see a lot of issues with what they're doing, and the biggest one is typically unfunded mandates. So the politicians say, "Hey, teach this school district," and they go, "Okay, great. Give us some money to make sure we can implement it." And they're like, "Oh, you don't get any money, just teach it." Right. So those are some of the big issues I see, and not just Florida. I don't want
Right.
to, I love every state that brings it to, and thank you for all the champions that have done that. But I think if we're going to do it, we should do it right, with the ultimate goal of making sure we're graduating self-sufficient, contributing members of society.
How much of that though is on the parents? I mean, like again, I think back to myself, and when I went to college, I knew what a credit card was because I got that education from my dad. I knew how to balance my checkbook because I got that education from my dad. Maybe I was lucky that had a dad who had some financial literacy, who is also a CPA, but I just think, that's the kind of stuff whether the school teaches my kids or not, that's the kind of stuff my boys are going to get before I set them loose.
I agree with you. I'd say the parents are always a primary responsibility. Years ago, a parent taught the kid how to farm, earn income, save it, can it, right? So that was 200 years ago. And parents just don't do that anymore. Additionally, with schools, we've been teaching the same subjects for 100 years. We have the internet now, right? I don't need to know, I had to take advanced math, foreign language. I had to take, history and all this stuff. I mean, some was good, some not. I don't use any of it. I don't care what the hypotenuse of a rectangle is. It's not useful for me, so I'll look it up on YouTube. So, with schools, I say, hey, we're paying tax dollars for this. Let's make sure that we're eliminating subjects that don't benefit 100% of the students, or making them, I guess, optional, right? Making personal finance required in these other subjects that benefit a small number of people, like advanced math, advanced science. I never cared about those subjects. I knew I was not going that way. So making those optional, but making the thing that will benefit them that they can use every day required.
Yeah, I think everybody itself. Let me tell you, Sean, the one thing that, again, you got, I would say you get lucky in regards to that, right? So me growing up, I'll tell you that a single mom, working hard and doing those kind of things, she stretched a dollar. Again, amazing woman to be able to raise 2 kids, get them through college, and do the things that she did. But we never, again, have a conversation about money. She goes, "Look, I'll give you what you need, and go figure out what you got to do with the rest of it." So she created 2 hustlers growing up in New York City. So I totally understand that. But there's a lot of folks itself that, again, it's a struggle. It's like a lot of parents are just making ends meet. And for me, it's like, the hard part of talking to folks like that, it's kind of like, if I have to talk about money, there's that emotional piece, there's that shame. And it's like, man, well, if I have to talk to my kids to tell them, hey, look, we can't do the vacations, or we can't do these kind of things, I'd rather not talk about it, because then it becomes this internal problem that, that we're struggling with. So, it's one of those kind of things where it's like, I get the spectrum of, like, we know it's important, but man, if you have to air out that dirty laundry, boy, sometimes it does get a little stinky. That's where we get problems there.
And I get it. And I don't mean to sound like I'm disrespecting anybody who doesn't.
Nah.
That's clearly not my intent. I mean, I have those conversations every day. Just before we recorded this interview, I had a conversation with a lady who wanted to file bankruptcy, and I had to explain the whole bankruptcy process. And that's really hard when people have made that decision that I've got to go talk to a bankruptcy attorney. They're not, I get it. They're not really in a good place. And I understand, maybe I got a little lucky to have the dad that I have that taught me all those things. And so, be able to pass that on to my kids. So I totally get it. So, what other financial issues or financial challenges or financial problems are people kind of struggling with that we can help educate them on?
Yeah, I think today it's really, hey, a lot of people weren't prepared leading up until this inflation, this Fed rate hike, and they're not prepared. They're seeing rates go higher on their credit cards. They were just barely keeping their heads above water before. Those people are pushed down. The people that weren't keeping their heads are pushed down further. So scary time for many people. But as crazy as it sounds, to prepare now, we don't know what the future is going to hold, right? So it's important that we buckle down. It's never a fun time if you're living on that delicate balance between I'm okay financially and I'm not. If you're living on that line, now it's time to really buckle down, put in some work. And I wish I had the secret answer, just do this and all your worries are taken away. But it's time to cut those expenses, increase that income, and focus on preparing for what's next. Who knows? It could be, beautiful ending here after 6 months and everything's great. I'm a little worried, so I hope people just get in that preparation mode and make the changes now, even when, like George pointed out, hey, when there's that shame and feeling, hey, why didn't I get ready before? Now I'm worried again. I had a couple years of stress-free living. Now I'm back here. Why did I do this to myself? So it's really important to forgive, let that feeling go, start that preparation mode, really focus on that income and expense area.
Love it. Positive money habits and really just keeping the end game kind of in place itself. And here's the thing, I always tell clients itself, as much as we'd like to all be millionaires, I'd rather just have financial stability month to month to be able to kind of enjoy, what we're doing now. And then obviously have that nest egg to be able to retire whenever that is, to be able to retire with that dignity itself as well. So it's a fine line, Ben, but don't get me wrong. I'll take the $1 million, at the end of the day too.
So if you, one of the reasons I've had a lot of offers from financial advisors to come on the show, and I've declined a lot of them. And part of the reason is because I believe, and listeners, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that a lot of the people that listen to this show do so because they're trying to figure out how to get out of debt. How do I create that stream of money that I can begin to start saving? But if someone's listening to us and listening to this show now, and they say, okay, well, I need to be prepared for the next time. I need to start to squirrel some money away. I need to start to invest some money, but I don't, I'm paycheck to paycheck. So where can someone start if they're paycheck to paycheck, but they want to save or invest? Where do they start? What's the first step?
Yeah. I think really with that situation, hey, if we look at the income side, hey, are you in position for a raise? Are you in position to get a higher paying job somewhere, or can you do some side hustle, right? Pick up Uber for a little bit. I don't know if that's a good business thing. I never evaluated that, but hey, what are those opportunities for you that you can earn that much more to do that? On the expense side, what can you cut out, right? That's always the hard part. That's always a challenging thing. But also on the debt side, making sure your credit card rates, they're going to be going up more than likely if the Fed keeps these rate hike up, which a lot of people think they will. So what can you do now to contact them and make sure that, hey, we're set? Do they have a fixed rate period, a transfer? So how can we limit the negative impact of these Fed rate hikes on your credit card debt? So I think those may be some ways that they can address. Again, there's no, a lot of people are looking for the ultimate answer, but it's work on any of those areas. But if they're here listening to your show, I think that's really the first step. Gaining that knowledge, gaining that confidence to make those decisions, and listening to people and their thoughts, because everybody has different ideas, and considering their option. I would also suggest, hey, if they learn via financial coach or educators or any type of formal session, they can consider that as well. But again, there's the beauty of today. There's so many ways to learn. We got podcasts, we got books. I saw your book out there too. Congratulations on that. So there's many ways to learn, right? You find the person you like, right? You like Sean George here, come here and listen, and you're going to learn in a way that's comfortable for you.
Nice. I do want to give out your information again real quick. We did in the introduction, but your website is financialeducatorscouncil.org.
Correct.
You can find Vince on LinkedIn at Vince Shorb. You can find him on Facebook at the National Financial Educators Council. You can find him on Twitter at NFEC_FinEDU, FINEDU. Or you can email him, vince@financialeducatorscouncil.org. So there's your all your contact information, which again, was in the introduction. It'll be in the notes as well. If any of you want to reach out to Vince directly. George, you got anything else?
No, I'll just say, Vince, what are you working on? What's next on the horizon that we can be looking forward from your organization?
Yeah, really, we're going to continue our mission of scaling the local communities. We've built out a lot of advocacy campaigns, and we're partnering with people in local communities around the country and really bringing that there. So, people have access to materials, and we're raising awareness so they know and they're motivated to actually, take part in a journey toward greater financial wellness.
Very nice. Well, again, thank you, Vince. We appreciate you being on this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast.
Hey, thanks, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
And I think this one fits in well with our motto here of we would love for you to have more money at the end of the month rather than more month at the end of the money. And so thanks again to Vince Shorb. Again, his contact info is in the notes if anybody wants to contact him. But I think that'll put a wrap on this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. And we will talk to you in next week's episode.